The hall of the alien capital was unlike anything a human had ever seen. It was carved from shining crystal that reflected the colors of distant stars. High pillars reached upward as if trying to touch the heavens, and the floor was so smooth it mirrored the figures walking across it. Humans had visited many alien worlds in the past, but nothing felt as intimidating as standing inside this great chamber of the Zyori Empire. Every stone and every beam of light seemed to remind the human guests that they were standing in the heart of a civilization far older and stronger than their own. The air was heavy with silence, broken only by the sound of steps as the human delegation was guided forward. Among them was Aaron, a young envoy who had never expected to find himself part of such a historic meeting. He was not a soldier, nor a politician of high rank. His background was simple, his life before this mission ordinary. Yet for reasons he barely understood, he had been chosen to serve as one of the human voices at these talks of peace. Aaron felt the weight of eyes upon him as he walked. The Zyori stood taller than any human, their slender forms covered in silver garments that glimmered with faint patterns of light. Their faces were calm but unreadable, and their large eyes seemed to pierce through thoughts and secrets. Aaron felt small among them, like a single fragile branch in a forest of ancient trees. The great crystal hall was filled with silence after the queen's words. The echoes of her voice still seemed to hang in the air, bouncing from pillar to pillar. Ministers of the Zyori stood frozen, their tall figures tense, their silver robes rustling faintly as they shifted in disbelief. On the other side, the human envoys sat stunned, their mouths half open, unsure if they had heard correctly. Only Aaron remained still at the center of it all, though his stillness came not from calm but from shock so complete that he could not even move. His mind struggled to understand the meaning of her words. The Queen of the Zyori, ruler of one of the most powerful empires in known space, had just declared, before two entire delegations, that she wanted him. Not as an ally. Not as a guest. She had spoken as if she were choosing a partner, a husband, in front of everyone. Whispers filled the chamber. The Zyori nobles were the first to react. Their voices rose in disbelief and outrage. One minister, tall and stern, stepped forward and bowed with a stiff movement. His voice trembled as he spoke, though whether it was from fear or anger was unclear. "Your Majesty," he said, "surely your words cannot be meant as they sounded. To speak of a union with a human is beyond tradition. Such things are not possible." The queen's eyes did not leave Aaron. She stood tall, her silver garments flowing like liquid light, and when she answered, her voice carried no hesitation. "My words were clear," she said. "I have chosen." Another noble, this one older with markings across his brow that showed high rank, raised his hand. "Your Majesty, the council must protest. The dignity of the throne, the respect of the people, even the very fabric of our tradition would be shaken by such a decision. A human cannot be queen's consort. It is unheard of." The human envoys began to murmur as well. Their leader, a man named Haven, glanced nervously at Aaron before standing. He tried to keep his voice respectful but could not hide his alarm. "Your Majesty," Haven said, "perhaps there is some misunderstanding. We came here for peace. My envoy, Aaron, is honored to be in your presence, but he is not prepared for such a declaration. If this is some kind of symbolic gesture, we can." "It is not a gesture," Queen Syria interrupted. Her voice was calm but final, and it carried the weight of a truth that could not be softened. Aaron's heart pounded in his chest. He wanted to speak, to say something that might release him from the crushing attention of the entire chamber, but the words would not come. His thoughts tumbled over one another in confusion. He had never dreamed of standing in such a place, let alone being chosen by someone of such power. He felt as though the ground beneath him had shifted, leaving him floating in unfamiliar air. At last, the queen turned her gaze fully upon her ministers. "You question why I would make such a choice," she said. "You fear that I have acted in haste. But hear me. Our people have walked the stars for millennia. We have built cities of light and ships that cross galaxies. Yet what we have gained in knowledge, we have lost in something else. We have forgotten the strength that comes not from perfection but from struggle." She raised her hand slightly, pointing toward Aaron. "This human, though simple in birth and role, carries that strength. I have watched him, even in silence. He is not like our nobles who speak with polished words yet hide fear behind them. He stands without armor, and yet there is resolve in his eyes. That is what I have chosen." The hall erupted again with voices. Some shouted in disagreement. Others whispered in fear. The queen's ministers argued among themselves, their pride wounded, their understanding of tradition shattered. On the human side, Aaron's fellow envoys were no less unsettled. Haven leaned close to the others, whispering quickly, his face pale. "This is dangerous. If the queen is serious, this could bind our people in ways we are not ready for. It could also tear apart everything we came here to build." Aaron heard him but felt as though the words came from far away. His thoughts were a storm, each wave crashing against the next. Why him? What did she see in him that even he could not see in himself? He was not a warrior, not a leader, not even the most skilled envoy among his peers. He had no title, no great achievement. Yet the queen's gaze remained fixed on him with a certainty that seemed unshakable. Finally, Aaron forced himself to speak. His voice was quiet but carried across the chamber because the entire hall had fallen still again to hear his reply. "Your Majesty," he said slowly, "I am honored by your words, but I do not understand. I am only a simple envoy. There are many stronger, wiser, and more worthy than I. Why me?" The queen's expression softened, though her voice remained steady. "Because you do not see yourself as worthy. That is what makes you so. My people strive for perfection in all things. But perfection without humility becomes empty. In you I see humility, and with it the courage to rise above limits. That is the strength I seek." Her words left Aaron speechless. Around him, the hall buzzed again, yet the queen's calm presence seemed to rise above the noise like a steady flame in a storm. The council demanded answers. "This cannot stand," one minister shouted. "Our people will never accept it." The queen turned to him. "Then they will learn. The path of the stars is not closed. If our people are to grow, they must walk alongside others, not only look down upon them." The human envoys struggled to respond. Haven raised his voice once more. "Your Majesty, this is no small matter. A bond such as this could bind our species together, but it could also divide us. Aaron cannot accept such a thing without understanding what it means." Queen Syria nodded once, as if she had expected this. "Then he shall have the chance to understand. Let there be a trial, not of combat but of spirit. Let this human live among us, face the weight of our people, and prove not only to me but to all Zyari that he carries the strength I see. If he succeeds, then none can deny my choice. If he fails, then I will listen to the council." The ministers exchanged uncertain glances. They could not openly defy the queen, for her authority was unbroken, yet her proposal gave them some relief. A trial would give them hope that the human would falter and the queen would be forced to abandon her strange decision. The human envoys looked to Aaron, concern plain on their faces. Heaven whispered urgently, "Do not agree too quickly. Think carefully. This is larger than you." But Aaron already knew that his life had been swept into something greater than himself. Whether he wished it or not, he could not walk away from the queen's words. The entire chamber watched him, waiting for his response. His voice trembled, yet he spoke with honesty. "If it is your will, your majesty," Aaron said, "then I will face this trial. I will live among your people and do my best to understand them. But I cannot promise greatness. I can only promise to be true to who I am." The queen's eyes shone faintly, and for the first time, a small smile touched her lips. "That is all I ask." The hall remained tense, but the matter was settled, at least for now. The queen's declaration had shaken both species to their core, but her command left no room for argument. Aaron would face a trial that none could predict, and through it, the fate of both humans and Zyori would be tested. As the session ended and the delegations were led away, Aaron felt the weight of countless eyes on his back. His fellow humans whispered in worry. The Zyori nobles glared with doubt. Yet in his heart, beneath the fear and confusion, there was also a spark of something new. Perhaps it was hope. Perhaps it was destiny. He did not know. But he knew this: nothing would ever be the same again. The news of the Queen's declaration spread through the Zyori capital faster than fire across dry grass. By the time Aaron was escorted to his guest quarters in the towering palace, the entire city already hummed with whispers. Citizens gathered in clusters along shining walkways, their crystal dwellings glowing with soft blue light, as they exchanged rumors. Some spoke in awe of the queen's boldness. Others whispered that she had lost her wisdom. Many asked the same question: why had she chosen a human, one of the most fragile species among the stars, when her people were full of strong and brilliant candidates? Inside the palace, the atmosphere was no calmer. The ministers argued late into the night, their voices echoing in the council halls. Some claimed the queen's decision would weaken the empire, that allowing a human into the highest seat of power would be an insult to their ancestors. Others, though fewer, argued that perhaps the queen saw something beyond tradition. But their voices were drowned out by the louder cry of resistance. Aaron sat quietly in his chamber, a room filled with glowing walls and soft light that seemed to breathe. Yet despite the beauty around him, he felt as though he were inside a cage. His thoughts raced, refusing to rest. He remembered the faces of the envoys when the queen had spoken, the disbelief in their eyes, the tension in their shoulders. He remembered the nobles' outrage, their voices sharp as blades. And above it all, he remembered the queen's calm expression, her gaze locked on him with certainty that he could not understand. He had asked himself the same question 100 times already: why him? He was not the most experienced envoy. He had no great skill in politics or war. He carried no fame, no history of grand deeds. Yet the queen had chosen him, not as a symbol, not as a political gesture, but with a personal conviction that seemed unshakable. The door to his chamber slid open, and Heaven, the leader of the human envoys, entered with a stern face. Aaron rose respectfully, though his shoulders slumped with unease. Heaven wasted no time with greetings. "Do you understand what this means?" Heaven asked, his voice low but firm. "The queen has tied your name to hers before both species. Whether you wished for it or not, you are now at the center of a storm that could decide the fate of humanity." "I did not ask for this," Aaron replied quietly. "I did not expect it. I still do not understand it." Heaven sighed and rubbed his forehead. "That makes two of us. But understand this, Aaron. Many of our people already fear the power of the Zyori. If you fail their trial, it will confirm every doubt they have about us. If you succeed, it could bind us to them in ways we are not ready for. Either way, this is larger than you. You must walk carefully. Aaron nodded, though his chest tightened with worry. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, heavier than anything he had ever carried before. He wanted to say he was not ready, but he already knew there was no turning back. The next day, the trial was announced. Aaron was to live among the Zyori people, not in the palace but in the heart of their cities, among workers, families, and citizens of all kinds. He would face no weapons, no battles of strength, but he would be watched at every step. The queen had promised her council that this trial would reveal whether Aaron truly carried the qualities she believed in. If he failed to earn the respect of even the common people, then her ministers would demand she abandon her choice. When Aaron stepped into the streets of the capital, guided by attendants, he felt hundreds of eyes upon him. The city was a wonder of light and crystal. Towers reached upward like frozen waterfalls, and bridges of glass stretched between them, glowing faintly with flowing energy. The air shimmered with transport ships that moved silently across the skies. But all of this beauty seemed distant compared to the stares of the people. Some Zyori looked at him with open distrust. Their large eyes narrowed, their graceful steps stiff as they moved aside to avoid him. Others whispered behind their hands, their voices sharp with mockery. Yet a few, only a few, looked with curiosity rather than disdain. Aaron walked with a steady pace, trying not to let his unease show, though inside his heart pounded. The first test was simple. He was brought to a community center where families gathered for meals. The Zyori citizens expected him to stand apart, to watch silently, perhaps to struggle with their customs. Instead, Aaron asked to sit among them. The attendants hesitated, but the queen's order had been clear: he was to face the people without barriers. The meal was strange to him. The food shimmered like small crystals, glowing faintly before dissolving into warmth on the tongue. He made no complaint, though the taste was unlike anything he had known. When he noticed a child struggling to reach a dish at the far end of the table, he gently passed it along. The child blinked in surprise, then smiled shyly. It was a small act, but the room grew quiet as the Zyori watched. The days passed with more challenges. He worked alongside citizens in their crystal forges, though he had no skill in shaping the glowing stone. His hands shook, his work was clumsy, yet he did not give up. He listened when the workers spoke of their hardships, nodding with patience, though he could offer no grand solutions. He played with children who dared to approach him, sharing laughter that echoed strangely among the crystal halls. Slowly, whispers began to change. Where once they spoke only of weakness, now some murmured of his persistence. Where once they mocked, now a few admitted that he did not carry himself with arrogance. Still, many doubted him. Many believed his presence was an insult to the throne. At night, Aaron returned to his quarters, weary from the weight of so many eyes. He often wondered if he was failing, if his clumsy efforts could ever win the trust of a people who had spent ages valuing perfection. Yet when he closed his eyes, he remembered the queen's words. She had chosen him not because he was perfect but because he was not. And in that thought, he found strength to rise each morning and face another day. In the council chambers, debates continued. Ministers pressed the queen to abandon her choice, warning that the people's patience was thin. Yet Scifi remained calm. "Let them see for themselves," she said. "Let them judge not by tradition but by truth." Some nights, She stood on her balcony, gazing at the stars, her thoughts distant. Her attendants sometimes asked why she placed so much faith in a single human. She only answered, because sometimes it takes an outsider to remind us who we are. Back in the city, Aaron faced his hardest test yet. He was brought to the Hall of Memory, where citizens honored the history of their people. There, elders spoke with pride of victories, of inventions, of perfection achieved across centuries. One elder turned to Aaron and asked with sharpness, "What has your species achieved that is worthy of standing beside us? You live short lives, you stumble, you fail again and again. What strength is in such weakness?" Aaron stood quietly for a moment, then spoke with honesty. "We fail, yes. We stumble many times. But it is in rising after each fall that we find strength. We do not live as long as you, but perhaps because our lives are short, we value each day more. We are not perfect, and we do not pretend to be. But it is in imperfection that we find hope, for there is always more to learn, always more to reach for." The hall grew silent. Some elders frowned. Others lowered their eyes in thought. The words were simple, but they carried a truth that many had forgotten. By the end of the third week, the whispers in the city had shifted again. Doubt remained, yes, but curiosity now walked beside it. Some who once mocked now greeted him. Some who once avoided him now paused to listen when he spoke. He had not become a hero, nor had he won every heart, but he had planted a seed. And far above the city, in her throne room, Queen Syria listened to the reports with quiet satisfaction. Her ministers still doubted, but the people had begun to see what she had seen. The trial was far from over, yet already the tides were changing. For Aaron, each day still felt like a mountain to climb. He carried doubt within him, fear of failure, fear of disappointing both his people and hers. But as he walked the glowing streets, hearing whispers not only of mockery but also of hope, he began to believe that perhaps the queen's choice had not been madness. Perhaps there was something within him after all, something worth seeing. And in that belief, fragile though it was, the first step of trust between human and Zyori had been taken. The trial was not a single event but a journey, a path filled with quiet tests that were meant to reveal more than strength of body. The Zyori people valued perfection in skill, in knowledge, in control. The queen had promised that Aaron would not be tested by weapons or battle but by the spirit of his heart. The council had agreed reluctantly, certain that a human would not withstand the weight of their culture. Aaron rose each day with the sun that glowed across the crystal towers. His steps took him through markets, forges, schools, and halls of memory. Each place carried its own challenge, though none were spoken aloud. He was simply placed among the people, left to act as himself, and watched by silent eyes that judged every movement. In the markets, he saw beauty and coldness side by side. Stalls glittered with fruits that shimmered like stars, cloth that flowed like water, and tools that hummed with energy. Yet the merchants stood tall and distant, their voices polite but cool. Aaron was given coins to use, the same as any Zyori, and told to live as they lived. When he struggled to understand the values of their goods, some laughed softly. Yet instead of becoming angry, he laughed with them, admitting his confusion with honesty. His clumsy attempts to trade became a small scene, and soon a few merchants began to guide him patiently, showing him how to measure with glowing rods, how to weigh with scales of light. In the schools, the challenge was different. He was asked to sit with young students, to learn their lessons and share his own. The children were curious and bold, unafraid to ask why his hands were rough, why his hair was plain, why humans did not glow like the Zyori did when touched by certain lights. Aaron answered with patience, telling them of his home, of oceans and forests, of wind that carried the smell of earth. He asked them questions in return, and when one child struggled with a puzzle of energy patterns, Aaron knelt beside him and worked through it slowly, though he himself barely understood. They failed twice, then succeeded together, and the child smiled with pride. The teachers watched quietly, their eyes softening. In the forges, he was tested by labor. The Zyori shaped crystal not with fire but with focused light, bending the material into tools and structures. Aaron's hands shook, his work uneven, yet he stayed long hours beside the workers. He listened to their stories of ancestors, of long nights spent perfecting their craft. When his piece broke, he asked them to teach him again. They saw his mistakes, but they also saw his persistence. One worker, an elder with hands that glowed faintly from years of shaping crystal, finally said, "You may not shape the stone as we do, but you shape patience as few can." The council, watching from afar, grew restless. They wanted him to fail. They sent him to more difficult places, to temples of memory where priests spoke in riddles, to gardens where each plant held meaning, to courts where citizens debated justice. In each place, Aaron did not shine as a master. He stumbled, admitted his lack of knowledge, and listened more than he spoke. Some mocked him for weakness. Others, however, began to see a rare kind of strength, the strength to be humble, to keep trying, to offer kindness without pride. One day, Aaron was brought to the Hall of Echoes, where the people gathered to share their grievances. Citizens stood in turn, speaking of problems in their districts, of broken transport lines, of shortages in energy flow. Aaron was told only to observe. Yet when an old woman spoke of her home losing light during the long night cycles, Aaron raised his hand. The hall turned in surprise, for he was not meant to speak. "I am no engineer," he said, "and I cannot fix your machines. But I know what it is to live in darkness. On my world, when the power fails, we gather together, we share warmth, we share food, and we wait for light to return. I cannot offer more than simple words, but perhaps your neighbors can share with you until the problem is repaired. No one should face the dark alone." The woman bowed her head, and though some in the hall dismissed his words as childish, others murmured in thought. For in his simple answer, they saw not technical brilliance but human warmth. As the days turned into weeks, something began to change. Where once the people had avoided him, now some greeted him. Where once they whispered only doubts, now they spoke of curiosity. Children ran to him without fear. Workers nodded in respect. Not all were convinced, for tradition was deep, but cracks had begun to form in the walls of pride. One evening, when the stars hung bright above the city, Aaron was summoned back to the palace. He was led to a balcony where Queen Scifi stood, her gaze fixed on the horizon where crystal towers met the sky. She turned as he approached, her face calm but her eyes bright with thought. "You have walked among my people," she said. "Tell me what you have seen." Aaron stood beside her, looking at the glowing city below. "I have seen doubt. I have seen mistrust. But I have also seen kindness, even if it was hidden at first. Your people are strong, but they carry their strength like a weight. They fear weakness so much that they forget its value." The queen studied him in silence. "And what of yourself? Do you still ask why I chose you?" Aaron hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. Every day. I try, but I am not perfect. I fail often. That is why," Scifi replied softly. You fail, and yet you rise. My people fear failure, so they stand still. But you move forward. That is what I wished them to see. Aaron lowered his gaze, unsure how to respond. Yet inside, something shifted. For the first time, he began to believe that perhaps her choice was not a mistake. The trial, however, was not over. The council demanded a final test, one that would take place in the central square where thousands could gather. They wished for the people themselves to see and judge. On the day of the gathering, the square was filled with citizens, their robes of silver and blue shimmering under the twin suns. Aaron stood before them, his heart heavy, his hands trembling. The council called him to speak, to show the people who he was. He took a breath, feeling the weight of thousands of eyes. Then he spoke, not with grand words but with the honesty that had carried him so far. I am human. I am not perfect. I do not have your skill, your long lives, your brilliance. I stumble, I fail, I make mistakes. But from those mistakes, I learn. From each fall, I rise again. That is our strength. Not perfection, but the courage to keep moving forward. If you cannot accept me, I understand. But if you can see value in me, then perhaps you can see value in all humans. And perhaps together, we can build something greater than either of us alone. The square was silent. For a moment, Aaron feared he had failed. Then a single voice rose from the crowd. It was a worker he had labored beside in the forges. He speaks true, the worker called. I saw him try again and again, though his hands were clumsy. He did not give up. Another voice followed, a child he had helped in the school. He helped me when I could not finish the puzzle. One by one, voices joined, until the square was filled with a low chorus of agreement. Not all spoke, but enough that the council could not deny it. The queen stepped forward, her presence shining brighter than the suns above. You have heard him. You have seen him. The trial of hearts is not mine to judge alone, but yours. And you have spoken. The ministers looked out over the crowd, their resistance faltering. They could not silence the voices of the people. Aaron stood trembling, not from fear but from the weight of what had just happened. The trial had not proven him flawless. It had shown him flawed, but human, and in that humanity, the Zyari had seen something new. The queen turned to him, her voice low but firm. You have given them what I hoped they would see. Not perfection, but courage. Not brilliance, but heart. And in that moment, Aaron understood that the trial was never about skill or knowledge. It was about showing a people who feared failure that imperfection could be strength, that even a simple human could change the hearts of an empire. The day of decision came with skies painted in silver and blue, the twin suns rising over the crystal towers of the Zyari capital. The city glowed as if it knew history was about to be written. For weeks, Aaron had walked among the people. He had spoken, listened, worked, and stumbled before them. Now the final choice rested not only with the queen but also with the voices of her people and the judgment of her council. The central square was vast, built of white crystal that shone like water under the suns. It had seen coronations, victories, and great ceremonies of the past, but never had it seen something like this. Thousands gathered, filling every corner, their robes flowing like rivers of silver light. Some came with curiosity, some with doubt, and some with hope that perhaps change was possible. At the heart of the square stood a high platform. Upon it stood Queen Syria, regal and steady, her garments glowing faintly as the light touched them. Beside her was Aaron, wearing simple robes gifted by the queen, robes that marked him as honored but not yet accepted. Around the platform stood the ministers of the council, their faces set in careful masks, their eyes sharp with judgment. The human delegation watched from a nearby stand, tense and silent, knowing their envoy's fate could alter the future of their entire species. The queen raised her hand, and silence fell across the square. Her voice rose, clear and calm, carrying to every ear. "My people," she began, "you have seen what I have chosen. You have seen this human walk among you, not with perfection, but with honesty. Today we stand at a moment that will shape our path forward. We must decide whether to remain bound by pride or to step into the future with courage." Her words lingered in the air. Then she turned to Aaron. "Speak now, and let all hear your heart." Aaron felt his chest tighten. He had spoken many times in smaller halls, before children, workers, and elders. But never before had so many eyes rested upon him at once. He took a slow breath and stepped forward, letting his gaze move over the sea of faces. "I came here as nothing more than a simple envoy," he began. "I never expected this. I never sought to be chosen. I was afraid, and I am still afraid. But in my time among you, I have learned something important. You see my flaws. You see that I stumble, that I am not perfect in skill or in knowledge. And that is true. I am human. My people are not perfect. We fall, we struggle, and often we fail. But it is because of this that we grow. Each mistake teaches us. Each fall makes us rise again. That is our strength." He paused, his voice steady though his heart raced. "You asked why a human could be worthy of standing beside your queen. I cannot give you perfection. I cannot give you the brilliance that your people already have. But I can give you something different. I can give you persistence. I can give you loyalty. I can give you a heart that does not give up, even when the path is hard. If you cannot accept me, I will understand. But if you can see value in me, then perhaps you can also see value in humanity. And perhaps, together, we can build a bridge that no storm can break." The square remained silent, every word hanging like a weight. Then, slowly, voices began to rise. Some spoke of doubt, unwilling to let go of tradition. But others called out in support. A worker shouted, "He labored with us though his hands were weak." A teacher said, "He gave patience to our children." A child's voice echoed, "He helped me finish what I could not." The sound grew, a wave of voices washing over the square. It was not unanimous, but it was strong enough to shake the council's certainty. The ministers glanced at one another, their stiff faces showing cracks of unease. They could not deny the people's voices. At last, the eldest minister stepped forward. His voice was stern, yet softer than before. "Your Majesty, the council cannot fully accept what has no root in tradition. Yet we cannot deny what we have seen. The human has shown qualities that many among us admire. If this is your will, then let it be written, though with caution." Queen Syria's eyes glimmered as she turned back to her people. "It is not only my will. You have spoken, and I have listened. The path is clear." She reached for Aaron's hand, lifting it for all to see. The gesture was simple, yet it sent a wave of shock and wonder across the square. "Before all who stand here, I declare my choice again. This human, Aaron, shall be my partner, not only in name but in spirit. Together we will guide our peoples into a future of unity." The crowd erupted, some with cheers, others with quiet disbelief, but the sound was alive. For the first time in generations, the Zyori had seen a choice made not from tradition but from heart. The human envoys watched in awe, their leader Havan shaking his head with both worry and admiration. "History has just changed," he whispered. "Whether for good or for danger, I do not yet know. But it has changed." Aaron stood beside the queen, his hand trembling in hers. He did not feel like a hero. He did not feel like a man who had conquered an empire. He felt like himself, uncertain but determined, still the same envoy who had walked into the crystal hall weeks ago. Yet now, somehow, he carried the hopes of two species on his shoulders. The days that followed were filled with both celebration and resistance. Some Zyori nobles still grumbled in private, warning that such a union would weaken the throne. Others, however, began to see opportunities for growth, for new ideas, for a future where pride did not blind them. Among the people, curiosity spread faster than doubt. Children spoke of the human who had eaten at their tables. Workers told stories of the human who had stumbled but never quit. For the humans, the news traveled across the stars. At first, many were shocked, even fearful. But as reports spread of how Aaron had been accepted, cautious hope grew. The idea that a human could stand as equal beside a Zyori queen lit a flame of pride across distant colonies. One evening, as the city glowed under starlight, Aaron and Siraya stood on the palace balcony together. Below them, the streets shimmered with life. The queen's voice was soft, meant only for him. "You have changed my people more than I expected," she said. "Not by force, not by brilliance, but by being true to yourself." Aaron smiled faintly. "I do not know if I changed them. Perhaps they were ready to change, and I only gave them a reason." She looked at him, her eyes steady. "That is enough. Sometimes one spark is all it takes to light the sky." For a long moment they stood in silence, watching the stars. They both knew the path ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, misunderstandings, and resistance. But there would also be hope, and hope was stronger than fear. Thus began the first union between human and Zyori, not as conqueror and conquered, not as ruler and subject, but as partners. The legend of the queen and the human would spread across the stars, told in halls and homes, remembered as the moment when two worlds chose to walk forward together. And though Aaron had never sought it, though he had never believed himself worthy of such a place, he had become a symbol of what humanity could offer to the universe, not perfection, but heart. The hall was filled with tension. For decades, humans and Zyori had regarded each other with suspicion. Though open war had never broken out, skirmishes and misunderstandings had left scars on both sides. Now, for the first time, leaders from both species sat under the same roof to speak of peace. The human delegation carried hope but also fear, while the Zyori nobles carried pride sharpened by tradition. No one knew how this meeting would end. At the far end of the hall stood the throne of the Zyori queen. It was not a seat of gold or jewels but a living structure of crystal and light that seemed to breathe with energy. Upon it sat Queen Siraya, a figure of grace and strength. Her posture was calm, but her presence filled the chamber with quiet command. She was younger than most of her council, yet her authority was absolute. Aaron had read stories of the queen, how she was both admired and doubted within her own empire. She was known for her wisdom and her curiosity about other species, but some nobles whispered that she was too open, too willing to consider ideas outside of tradition. Now, seeing her in person, Aaron felt both awe and unease. She was not like the rulers he had imagined. There was no arrogance in her gaze, but there was something else, something deep, searching, almost human. The human delegation bowed respectfully, and the talks began. Voices rose and fell as leaders spoke of treaties, trade, and boundaries. The words were careful, polished, and heavy with hidden meaning. Aaron listened as his fellow envoys argued with Zyari ministers, each side defending its pride while trying not to break the fragile bridge of peace. He was not expected to speak much. His role was to observe, to take notes, and to offer thoughts only if asked. Yet as the hours passed, Aaron noticed something strange. Whenever he glanced toward the throne, he found the queen's eyes on him. At first he thought it was his imagination, but the pattern continued. Even as ministers debated fiercely, even as her council demanded her attention, Queen Syria's gaze returned to him. It was not hostile, nor was it simple curiosity. It was as if she was searching for something within him. Aaron tried to keep his composure, but inside his chest, his heart pounded with confusion. The debates grew heated. Some of the Zyari nobles declared that humans could not be trusted. They argued that humanity was too young, too reckless, and too fragile to stand as equals with the Zyari. On the human side, voices rose in anger, insisting that humans had survived hardships greater than the Zyari could imagine. For a moment, it seemed that the talks would collapse into failure, and silence returned to the chamber like a storm waiting to break. It was then that the queen rose from her throne. The hall fell into silence, every voice cut short by her presence. She stepped forward, her robes flowing like streams of silver light. Her ministers looked up at her with surprise, and the human envoys straightened nervously, unsure what was about to happen. Queen Syria's voice was calm but carried power that reached every corner of the chamber. She spoke of the purpose of the meeting, reminding both sides that peace could not be forged through pride alone. She spoke of the stars, how they belonged not to one species but to all who had the courage to reach them. Her words seemed to soften the anger in the room, though doubt and tension still lingered. Aaron listened closely, struck by the way her voice carried not only authority but also sincerity. Unlike the nobles who spoke only of tradition and strength, the queen's words held a gentleness that was rare in the hall. He felt a strange connection to her, though he could not explain why. He was only a minor envoy, a simple human with no great power. Yet somehow, in that moment, he felt as though she was speaking directly to him. The queen's eyes returned to him once more, and this time she did not look away. Aaron felt his breath catch. It was not the gaze of a ruler addressing a subject. It was the gaze of someone who had made a choice, though he did not yet know what that choice was. Around him, the other humans noticed her focus and exchanged uncertain glances. The Zyari council, too, shifted uneasily, sensing something unusual in their queen's attention. The silence grew heavy. Aaron's mind raced. Why him? Why, out of all the humans present, did her gaze linger on him? He wanted to look away, but he could not. Something in her eyes held him still, as if the entire hall had vanished and only the two of them remained. At last, Queen Syria spoke again, her voice firm and clear. She did not address her council. She did not address the delegation as a whole. Instead, she spoke words that fell like a thunderbolt into the silence of the hall. Her gaze still fixed on Aaron, she said, "I have chosen. This human shall be mine." Gasps filled the chamber. Nobles rose to their feet in shock. The human delegation exchanged looks of disbelief. Aaron himself stood frozen, his thoughts scattering like leaves in the wind. He had come here as a simple envoy, expecting only to listen and learn. Yet now, before two civilizations, the queen of an empire had declared something no one could have imagined. The silence stretched on, heavy and unbroken. The meaning of her words had not yet been fully understood by all present, but the truth was clear. The queen had seen something in the human envoy, something that defied reason and tradition. And in that moment, as the hall trembled with shock, Aaron realized that his life had just been pulled into a path from which there would be no return.